Thank you everyone for coming. Everybody for coming. I'd like to start with just a refuah shlema for my grandmother, my mother's mother. Last week she spent a few days in the hospital. Baruch Hashem, she's home, but she should have continued refuah. Her name is Michla Bas Rivka. So I want to discuss today the Gemara, famous Gemara story recounted in Masechtas Gittin, starting on source 1 on Nunhei Amud Beis. And the way I got onto this topic, although it is timely for Tisha B'Av, was I was reading a sefer called Upirya Masuk, which has very many fascinating divrei Torah in it, and there was a riddle. There was a riddle in the sefer which asked. He says, "How many halachos could you name throughout Orach Chayim, throughout the regular part of Shulchan Aruch that we're familiar with, that are related to the sugya of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, but have nothing to do with Tisha B'Av and Avelis?" And I'm looking at this, and I'm like, wow, I don't know. I've learned Shulchan Aruch, many parts of it, not all of it, and I was trying to think about different halachas that maybe are related to Kamtza, Bar Kamtza, that not Tisha B'Av related. And until I turned the page and got to the answer, it was a little bit stumping. So once you turn the page and see the answer, of course, it all comes rushing forward. But so I took this opportunity to discuss the Gemara, which is obviously very timely to Tisha B'Av, and from there we'll branch off to many different halachas which are not related to Tisha B'Av, but nonetheless Chazal, B'Roiv Chachmasam, set up for us to constantly remind us of this incident and to make sure it never gets repeated again. So let's first recap quickly the story of the Gemara. We'll speak it out outside. The Gemara tells us because of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, Yerushalayim was destroyed. What was the story? There was a fellow who, interestingly enough, the Gemara doesn't even tell us his name. There was a fellow, we'll call him Pliny Almaini, an anonymous fellow who was making a party. It was a wedding or some type of party, and he wanted to invite his good friend Kamtza. So he sends a shliach, he sends the messenger to deliver an invitation to his friend Kamtza. Seemingly the messenger, who also is anonymous in the Gemara, seemingly makes an innocent mistake and invites Bar Kamtza instead of Kamtza. And Bar Kamtza was the arch enemy of the anonymous party maker. So Bar Kamtza gets his invitation and maybe thinks it's a sign of remorse or some type of, they want to make friends again with this guy. He doesn't really understand why he gets the invitation, presumably, and he goes to this party. He comes to the party, he's enjoying himself, and when the party maker, we'll call again Pliny Almaini, the host sees Bar Kamtza's arch enemy there, he goes livid and tries to kick him out. And Bar Kamtza says, "No, please don't kick me out. I'll be very embarrassed. I'm offering to pay for my portion. Whatever I eat here, I'll pay for it. Here's $20, and it won't cost you anything. Just let me stay here." And the guy says, "Absolutely not." Right? He wants him out. So he goes the next step. He jumps. "I'll pay for half the party. You have 200 people there. I'll pay for 100 people's food here. Here's cash, COD right here, right now." And he refuses. And again, he pleads with him, "I'll pay for the whole party. Just don't embarrass me by throwing me out in front of everybody." And again, the host completely refuses Bar Kamtza's request and throws him out. Bar Kamtza is very upset about what happened, how he got so embarrassed. And he says there were many chashuv people, there were rabbanim who were sitting by this party and were not moicha, did not protest to protect my honor. I'm going to go ahead now and turn face against my fellow Jews and become a malshin and go tell the Romans some bad things, some lashon hara about the Jews. So Bar Kamtza goes and tells the Romans that the Jews are rebelling against you. The Romans say, "Really? We didn't know that. What do you mean?" He says, "Yeah, go see. Send them a korban, send them a sacrifice for their Beis Hamikdash." And the halach is that the Beis Hamikdash could accept the korban oila even from Goyim. And you'll see the Bar Kamtza tells the Romans that the Jews will not accept your sacrifice. And the Romans say, "Okay, we'll try." And they choose their choicest, nicest animal to send to the Beis Hamikdash out of respect. And Bar Kamtza on the way, and he's the shliach, he's the messenger bringing this korban to the Beis Hamikdash, puts on a little blemish, a slight imperfection in the animal, something which is hard to notice. The Gemara says two options what it was. Either it was something on the lip, very small cut on the lip, or something small in the eye, which to the regular onlooker or to the Romans who sent it, they would never have noticed that anything happened to the animal. But to the Kohanim, who are now going to be responsible to check the animal before it's put onto the Mizbeach, they would find it and they would deem it unfit, not suitable for the Beis Hamikdash. And that's what happened. Bar Kamtza bring this korban, he put the mum on it, the Kohanim check it, and they realize that it has a mum on it. And they don't want to bring it, even though they know it's from the Roman government. And then the Khanim say, well, maybe we should bring it. The Gemara says that the Rabbanan said we should bring it because Shaloi Malchus, we should make sure we have peace with the government. We don't want to ruffle any feathers in the Roman government. If they're going to see we're not going to accept their carbon, perhaps there could be some negative consequences. So they were going to bring the carbon until one Chacham, the Gemara says, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulos, gets up and says, no, we cannot allow this carbon to be brought because people will say that, oh, look, you could bring Bali Mumen, you could bring imperfect, and you could bring animals with blemishes onto the Mizbeach. The Chachamim listened to him, and they did not bring the carbon. Eventually, word got back to the Romans that the Jews refused to accept their carbon, and the Gemara concludes from here, because of the Senusa, because of the humility of Zechariah ben Avkulos, that he did not want to allow this carbon to be brought. That brought to the continued destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. V'sarfas heichaleinu v'heglisanu me'artzeinu. We were kicked out of Eretz Yisrael. So again, the Gemara starts off saying that because of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, Yerushalayim was destroyed. We just quickly recap the story, and the end of the story also remarks that there was Zechariah ben Avkulos, although he might have had the purest of intentions, but it was misplaced humility on his part, or maybe it's too naive on his part, that he did not allow the carbon to be brought. So one question I want to start with, which we're not going to answer right away, is the Gemara starts off with, because of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, Yerushalayim was destroyed. Now, Kamtza did not appear at all in the whole story. Kamtza was the friend of the host, the person who was making the party. He did not get the invitation. He did not go to the party. He seemingly did not do anything wrong. Bar Kamtza was the enemy who got invited, who came to the party, who got embarrassed, and who eventually was Malshin on Klal Yisrael. So Bar Kamtza is the bad guy of the story, is the villain in the story. What did Kamtza do wrong that the Gemara says that because of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, Yerushalayim was destroyed? That's a question to think about, and we'll get to it, Be'ez Hashem, as we go along. But first, I want to point out 4 halachos that we find scattered throughout Orach Chaim, throughout Shulchan Aruch, which the Chacham tell us are rooted in this story. The first is in source number 2. This is a halacha on Hilchos Beis HaKnesses. I'll read the Shulchan Aruch inside and I'll explain. Misha Hishel Beis HaKnesses, someone who lends his house to become a shul. We call this in our term a shtibel. So you build a shtibel in your house, and it's your house, you own it, but you're letting the tzibur use your house as a shul. And you get into a scuffle, you get into some skirmish with somebody who's coming to your shtibel. You cannot prohibit that person from coming into your shul, into your house shul, unless you shut down the whole shul, basically. Meaning, if you have a private shul, again, in your house, and you dedicated your house to be used as a shul, like we said, it's called a shtibel usually in our terms, and the person whose house it is gets into a skirmish with somebody, he cannot aser that person from entering the shul. It's either all or nobody. Either shut down the shul. You get some
fisticuffs or just an argument.
You get someone to argument and you say, I don't want you entering my shul ever again. Whether it was physical or just verbal, that's
close down the shul.
Either close the shul or everybody's in. You can't pick and choose who's invited to your shul or not. That's the halacha. Where does this come from? So the Rishonim learn this is actually one of the Chayim de Rabbeinu Gershom. We're all familiar with the Rabbeinu Gershom Ar Agoda, the earliest of the Rishonim. Rabbeinu Gershom instituted various halachos that he set up, and the Rishonim agreed to them that will stand. The most famous one of the Chayim de Rabbeinu Gershom is that a man may not marry 2 women. We all know in HaTorah a man is allowed to marry more than one wife. Rabbeinu Gershom instituted that a man may not marry more than one wife for our benefit. And many other things Rabbeinu Gershom instituted. Their place can bring a list of them. Many of them are not so popular. Many of them most of them we still keep today, but they got absorbed into halacha. We don't necessarily always attach his name to it. Interestingly, this is one of the halachas that Rabbeinu Gershom established, that a person who has a private shul cannot kick out a singular person who he does not get along with. Says the Mishnah Brura in source 3, says, it brings Rabbeinu Gershom, he says, why? In the second line over there where it's underlined, it says, because we're concerned that we should not disgrace another Jew. Ayin Gittin, nun, says in Zion, should be nun vav. As opposed to if you ask for everybody to coming into your shul, then there's not an individual embarrassment, then you can shut down the shul. So says the Mishnah Berurah, the source for this halacha of Rabbeinu Gershom and Hilchos Beis HaKnesses, that if you have a shul, you cannot ask for a singular person, is from the halacha of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. We want to make sure that such a situation never repeats itself. Again, Kamtza Bar Kamtza's story took place by a party. It's interesting that we're learning a halacha for a shul from a party. Okay, it's something to think about, but it's the nature, it's the site of the matter over here that if a person is going to cause a public embarrassment to a singular individual, even in a shul setting, or especially in a shul setting, it's not appropriate, and the source is from Kamtza bar Kamtza. That's halacha number one we learned from Kamtza bar Kamtza in regards to halachos of a shul. The second halacha is in Hilchos Suda, and this is in the next page in source number 4. The Shulchan Aruch over here is quoting a Gemara in Pesachim. The Gemara in Pesachim, very interesting statement, says, "Hanichnas labayis." I quote the Shulchan Aruch with the same lashon. The Gemara: someone enters, you're a guest in someone's house. Kol ma sheyomer lo balabayis yaseh. Whatever the host tells you to do, you should listen. A good guest listens to his host, and he follows orders, whatever his host tells him what to do. Now, there's 2 words missing from this halacha that the Gemara concludes with, and that the Be'er Halacha in source number 5 quotes it. The Mishnah Berurah in the Chavetz Chaim in Be'er Halacha writes in source number 5, Biktsas nuschos b'shas pesachim. In some texts in the Gemara Pesachim, the Gemara adds, Isa chutz min say, unless the Baal Bayis tells you to please get out of my house, or get out of my house, one or the other. Then you don't have to listen. You're allowed to stay. If a person invites you into his house, you're a guest, whether you're a sleeping guest, or you're just eating a meal there, you should listen to the Baal Bayis. But if he kicks you out, you don't have to listen to him. Now, what does this halacha mean? So, one pshat, the Bach that the Mishnah Berurah is quoting here in the name of the Bach says that this halacha means any service when you're a guest in someone's house that the host requests you to do, you should follow your guest out of proper courtesy. You should fulfill that request for service. However, chutz mitzay means if the Baal Bayis wants to send you on an errand, can you run to the market for me and pick up 5 pounds of potatoes so I can make you a potato kugel? That you don't have to. You don't have to start doing. You don't have to be his runner and run out of the house and start picking up his groceries or other items for him outside the house. That's not included in the guest responsibility. That's how the Bach learns. However, there's a fascinating story in source number 6 that's recounted by the children of the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon, as we all know, was a tremendous tzaddik and Talmid Chacham, and he was most of his life he stayed pretty much based in Vilna, and only very infrequently would he travel around and be seen in the public eye. But here in the Hakdama, in the introduction to his comments on Shulchan Aruch, his children who published his comments on Shulchan Aruch after the Vilna Gaon passed away, they write a short biography and some short notes about their father, the Vilna Gaon, and they bring down a fascinating story that happened. He says, I'll read it and I'll explain. It says that I'll tell over. These are children of the Vilna Gaon talking on one of the actions and one of the customs of the Vilna Gaon, that one time he was traveling and he went and he stayed by an upstanding individual and he's there for dinner, and the Baal Bayis offers the Vilna Gaon whatever it was, a piece of chicken and some potatoes and green beans. Please sit down, Vilna Gaon, I'll give you an appropriate supper, something to eat. And whatever the situation was, but the Vilna Gaon from traveling, his stomach was not up to eating a proper supper, but he didn't say anything to the Baal Bas. He said the Baal Bas is so excited. The Vilna Gaon is here and he's pushing on him to eat. So the Vilna Gaon, although he was suffering from some type of stomach ailment, started to eat. After a couple of bites, he had to expel that which he regurgitate, that which he ate. The Pasha couldn't hold it down, so he excused himself for a moment. He took care of what he needed to take care of, and it comes back to the table. Now, if you or I were in such a situation, we would probably at that point, politely decline any further food and say, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not up to eating right now. But the Baal Bas comes in, sees the plate of food still full, and says, Vilna Gaon, es mein Kind, right? Es, please eat a little more. And the Vilna Gaon now stuck because the guy keeps telling him to eat. So he eats again a little more, but again, then a few minutes later, he has to excuse himself and he expels or regurgitates his food. This happens 3 or 4 times. The Vilna Gaon is eating little by little, and it keeps having to excuse himself to expel his food. The Talmidim ask him, say, Rebbe, what is going on? Just tell the poor Balabas that you're not up to eating, you're not feeling well. The Vilna Gaon turns to his Talmidim and says, what do you mean? It's up in a Gemara, there's a halacha mufresh in the Shulchan Aruch, Kol ma she'omer l'cha Baal Bayis aseh. Whatever the Baal Bayis tells you, I say, and he says, it's underlined, V'heishev alei amru chazal, Kol ma she'omer l'cha Baal Bayis aseh, u'b'chol makom shnemer aseh. Whenever Chazal tells us we have to do something, afilu b'divrei soifrim, shi'uroi l'kayim ad shetetzei nafshoi. we have to fulfill the words of Chazal. We don't have a choice over it. It's not an optional halacha, says the Vilna Gaon. So if Chazal tell me this is what I got to do, and the Balabas didn't pick up on the social cue that I'm not up to eating, he keeps telling me to eat. So the Vilna Gaon was of the opinion that you have to just follow this halacha to the simplest, most simple reading of the words. Now, before anybody gets too nervous, although this is a great story from the Vilna Gaon, the Mishnah Berurah does not quote this story, and in fact, in the Mishnah Berurah on that halacha, I didn't put it in the sheets, but the Mishnah Berurah quotes Paiskim who say explicitly not like this, the opposite of this, and it quotes the Big Yesha and other Paiskim who say that if you're a guest in someone's house and you're not feeling well and you can't eat, you should tell the Baal Bayis. Now, if you would not have the backdrop of the story of the Vilna Gaon, you would have said, well, why does Mishnah Berurah tell me to? That's Pashit, right? We would all, I think I would have thought, before I knew the story, that if the Baal Bayis would tell me, please eat, and I'm not feeling well, I would say, excuse me, I'm just not feeling so well, please, don't take it personally. I just traveled the whole day, sometimes it happens, traveling can knock a person out. I'm not up to eating. Mishnah Berurah paskins like that, but the Vilna Gaon, for whatever reason, in his Rav Chachmasai, decided that you have to take the halacha to the simple meaning. Okay, something to think about next time you're a host or a guest, how to properly ask your guests to eat food. You shouldn't be too demanding on them because maybe they're not up to eating it. Maybe they pass like the Vilna Gaon. And if you're a guest, maybe you can use the Mishnah Berurah as a kula that you can tell the host, excuse me, but I'm not up to eating. But be that as it may, the end of the halacha of Chutz Min Say, so the Sfas Emes wants to explain in source number 7, where did this come from? Where did the halacha come from that if the Baal Bayis tells you, please leave, you don't have to leave? Says this Sfas Emes, Yesh Loimar Shetiknu Kach Achar Hamaisa de Bar Kamtza. This was established after the story of Bar Kamtza, the Isa B'Hanizak, and the Gemara in Gittin tells us, Shiur Kilkolai Dezeh, a terrible tragedy happened because of that Bar Kamtza was kicked out. Shaitziyoi Shenichrav Beis HaMikdash, because that the Beis HaMikdash was ultimately destroyed. V'lechein Amru, therefore the Chazal teach us from this halacha, Shebiyad Ha'Ireach Shalei L'Shmaya Lotzes L'Pam. The guest has the option to tell the host, I am not leaving. I'm in and I'm not getting out. Kishiyah Loi Mizeh Busha, if there will be a great busha for him. So there's a second halacha here that, just an interesting twist, Chazal said from the story of Kamtza Bar Kamtza, we've developed this idea that if a person feels that he's getting too mavuyish, even though he's a guest, he's a visiting team, right? He's not on home turf here. Nonetheless, halachically he has this right to tell the host, I'm not leaving. He doesn't have to even offer to pay for half the party or the whole party like Bar Kamtza did. He could just say that I'm not leaving. So it's another interesting halacha that Chazal learned from Kamtza Bar Kamtza. The third halacha is in Hilchos Shabbos. This gets a little more technical. The halacha is that Chazal told us that we're not allowed to read certain documents on Shabbos because we might come to do forbidden things. It's the Rabbanan, for example. We're not allowed to read business contracts, electric bills, other things which are nageya to business because that might lead us to write or erase or get involved in business practices on Shabbos which are not appropriate. Now, besides that, Chazal took it one step further, and this is over here in Halacha Yud Beis and Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch paskins as follows: Zimein Orchim, someone invites guests to his house before Shabbos. V'heichen lahem minim megadim, prepares for them a whole feast, all types of dishes. V'kasav b'ksav kama zimein v'kama godam heichem. So he writes an appropriate balabasta before Shabbos. She knows she invited X amount of guests. She prepared X amount of food and X amount of portions. Everything is properly graphed out, so everything will be, very nicely organized. Says the halacha, also l'kroisa b'Shabbos. You cannot read from those papers on Shabbos. Afilim hu kasav agabe kaisel gavoya harba. Even if it's put up high on the wall on a bulletin board, high up out of reach. Mishum gezerah, because we're afraid. Shema yikro b'shtari hedyotis. You'll come to read other documents. Tahainu shtari chayvis v'chashbanis. If you're reading your menus and your details of your guest list and who's getting which portion, etc., who's gluten-free, who's vegan, you have all those details, everything's mapped out, we're afraid you're going to come to read other documents which are not appropriate for Shabbos. And the halacha continues, which we'll stop here for now in this halacha.
So it's not that you're afraid that they might suddenly realize, this person's coming and they don't eat this, I better prepare something else.
Well, we're not afraid of cooking per se, but we're afraid of two things. We'll get to it in a minute. What exactly we're afraid of? Well, it's not a chashash necessarily that a person might actually cook on Shabbos. We have other chashash we'll get to in a minute. But let's just reiterate this halacha. The halacha is that a person is not allowed to read from this paper, this graph he prepared before Shabbos, with all the details of his guest and his food, because we're afraid he might come to read shtari hedyotis. So the Mishnah Berurah in source number 9 says that there's two reasons for the depth of what Chazal said over here. Two reasons why Chazal were so concerned for this halacha. says, "B'Gemara Isa Shnei Time." The Gemara points out there's two reasons for this halacha. Echad, the first reason is Shema Yimchayk Min Ha'archim Min Ha'Magadim. What's going to happen is, you invited these guests before Shabbos, so the woman invites the guests, or she prepared the food, and she has everything mapped out, and then Friday night she starts getting nervous. Oh, I don't know if I have enough food, maybe I shouldn't serve this, because I don't have enough of this, I'll just serve one kugel instead of 3 kugels, and she we can understand, we can relate to this idea that things sometimes last minute, some people get nervous and they want to start changing things up. Maybe I should invite somebody else. That person doesn't go well with that person. They're going to start Xing out and crossing and making arrows and redoing the whole list. So we're afraid if you're going to look at that list on Shabbos, you might come to be meichek and come to erase something from the list, or it's a chashash that you might come to erase. That's the first reason why Chazal were afraid that you shouldn't look at these papers on Shabbos. V'oitam, and the second reason later on in Mishnah Berurah where it's underlined is what the Shulchan Aruch says, because of the chashash that you're going to come to read Shtori Hedyotis, you're going to come to read other documents. V'zeh aser. That's a simple halacha. But then the Mishnah Berurah says we have a problem, because although until now we've been talking about the balabas or the balabasta who arrange this paper before Shabbos, and they're the bosses, so they're in charge of what's happening. However, the Mishnah Berurah points out, the Poskim are saying that we see, though, that the custom is there's a shamish in shul, somebody who's appointed by the community who calls out after davening Friday night or something like that. Yankel, you're a guest in town, you go to Shmerel's house, and Beryl, you go to this guy's house. And he has a list of all the guests and all the hosts in town and what's available food-wise and people-wise and everything. And he reads off this paper, the shamish, and starts telling people where to go. So what's going on? How is the shamish allowed to do this act if we just said that a person is not allowed to read off this list on Shabbos because we're afraid either Shema Yimchayk or we're afraid they're going to come to each Shtori Hedyotis? So first of all, the Mishnah Berurah says there are those that are machmir and say you shouldn't do it. It's not appropriate. You see it being done, it shouldn't be done. But then the last two lines of the Mishnah Berurah, above the last line where it's underlined, after the period there, it says Omnam. However, B'Sharei Tshuva, in the Sefer Sharei Tshuva in the Shulchan Aruch, he brings a source to be lenient to allow the shamish, to read off the paper to tell the guests where to go. Afil the suda harishus, even if it's not a mitzvah suda, that was one of the reasons we discussed now, that if it's for a mitzvah, there's more reason to be lenient. And he says, why? Dal hashamish may karoloi gozru. Chazal were never geyser on the shamish not to be able to read off a paper, in order that the shamish does not make a mistake, and it should not come to a destruction and a devastation, like what happened by Kamtza bar Kamtza. How did the whole story get rolling? The shamish, the gabbai, the messenger who was sent by the host, the Pliny Almighty guy who started the Suda, made a mistake. Why did he make a mistake? Says the Poskim, perhaps because he wasn't following directions properly. He didn't look at the list before he went to call. It wasn't on Shabbos necessarily, but he just wasn't doing due diligence to read the guest list properly. And when he went to invite Kamtza, he instead, by mistake, invited Bar Kamtza. Says the Shari Tshuva, says he's quoting a Shvus Yaakov, the Poskim are saying, we have to be extra careful, even on Shabbos, when there's a chashash of might come to a race, or you might come to read other documents, these other concerns. But we have to make sure that such a story of Kamtza bar Kamtza, Chas v'Shalom, should never repeat itself, so we're going to be makel and allow the shamish, the gabbai, to read off the guest list or the food list on Shabbos, and even though it shouldn't be done, but in order to avoid any mishap and any uncomfortable situation from arising between a guest and a host on Shabbos, in order to make sure Kamtza bar Kamtza is never repeated, will be makel in Hilchos Shabbos and allow the shamish to read the paper. It's just an interesting concept. It's a din d'Rabbanan. We're not being making on the rice over here. It's a chashash, it's a gezer d'Rabbanan. But Chazal felt that the Poskim here are saying, in order to make sure we avoid any closeness to such a rehashing of such a story, or I would say to shouldn't play out again such a incident in history again. So we're doing whatever we can to ensure that no person gets improperly invited to someone else's house. That's the third halacha that the Poskim say we learn from Kamtza bar Kamtza. The fourth halacha, which is going to be the last time we're going to focus on Orach Chaim that we learn from Kamtza bar Kamtza, comes in the middle of Hilchos Sukkah. The halacha is, when it comes to buying the Daled Minim, when it comes to buying an Esrog, a Lulav, the Hadassim, and the Ravos, a person has to spend money in order to fulfill these mitzvahs. Now let's say a person buys an Esrog, and it's a kosher Esrog, whatever price it was, the basic price of an esrog, a lulav of an esrog, and then a couple of days before Sukkot, he has an opportunity to buy a nicer esrog, or something which is more beautiful for the mitzvah. So is he mechuyev to do it or not? So there's a whole formula you have to follow how much it's going to cost you more. If it's basically a third or less more in price than what you paid till then, if able to afford it, the halach is you should spend up to a third more for the hiddur mitzvah. Okay, we're not going to get so detailed now. Halach, that's the basic formula. Then over there, the Ramah comments and says, I'm going to start from the beginning where the arrow is pointing. Haga, Misha ain't like esrig. If someone doesn't have an esrig at all, or shar mitzvah averis, or any other mitzvah that doesn't have matzah, any other mitzvah which is a time it needs to be done a certain time of the year, ain't sarach levazvez aleh hain rav. You don't have to spend all your money to get that mitzvah. Like Chazal tell us, hamevazvez, someone who's giving out his money, ayevazvez yoysim echaymish. He doesn't have to spend more than a fifth of his life savings in order to fulfill the mitzvah. If a person has, do the math yourself, a person has $100 to his name, he doesn't have to spend more than $20 on the lulav and esrog. If he can't get lulav and esrog for $20, and that's all he has is $100, then he'll be able to, you should borrow from somebody else lulav and esrog. You're not potter from the mitzvah, you should try to fulfill in every way you can, but you don't have to necessarily buy your own. If you could get it for $20 or less, if that's somehow possible, then you should make sure to do it. Now, I feel the mitzvah averis. Then says the Ramah, v'davka mitzvah saseh. This is particularly in regards to mitzvah say you don't have to spend more than a fifth. Avoloi saseh, but in order to ensure that you don't transgress a negative commandment, yiten kol mimoinoi koidim shiava. A person has to be ready to give up his whole life savings. Let's pick to my example before. It's pretty easy. You can relate to that. You have to give up your whole $100 in order to make sure that you don't transgress a specific lav in the Torah. Any lav, any of the 365 lavim that exist in the Torah, if a person's facing with the terrible Nisayan that if he doesn't give up his money now, he will have to, it's not a question of life here, it's a question of money. If he doesn't give up all his money, he'll have to transgress a certain lav. The Ramah is paskening that a person has to be ready to empty out the bank or wherever he keeps his money in order to make sure that he does not transgress this lav. That's the halacha of the Ramah. Comes along the Magen Avram over there in source number 11 on the sheets where it's the arrow is pointing. It says Mashma Kitzas. It seems to be Begitin Daf Nun Vav Ubemaisid Bar Kamtza. It seems to be from the story of Kamtza Bar Kamtza. Shemuter Lava Aloisa say a person is allowed to transgress Aloisa say Mipnei Emas Hamalchus. Although we just said a person has to give up all his money in order to make sure that he does not transgress a lav. However, says the Magen Avram, it's masha from the sugi of Kamtza Bar Kamtza that if it's a story, if it's a situation of you're afraid of government something backlash from the government, then you're allowed to transgress lav. What's he referring to? So on the next page, on top of the page in source 12, is the Machzas HaShekel. The Machzas HaShekel is like a commentary on the Magen Avram. He explains what the Magen Avram is coming to say. And he brings down in the beginning, he recounts the end of the story of Kamtza Bar Kamtza, like we said before, where the Romans sent a carbon in the hands of Bar Kamtza, and Bar Kamtza put a mum in it, and the Chachamim wanted to bring the carbon, and Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkula said we shouldn't do it. But the Chachamim said we should bring a carbon. They want to be over a license. There's an Isser min HaTorah, there's a lav, that we cannot bring a carbon with a mum on top of a Mizbeach. Nonetheless, Chazal, Roiv the Chacham, wanted to push away that lav because of Shloi Malchus, in order to make sure that we're on good terms with the Roman government. However, Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkula said over here, there's a specific reason why we shouldn't do it, meaning conceptually you're right. Conceptually, said Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkula, we should push off the lav in order to be on good favor and good terms with the government. However, he said he was afraid that there was going to be a bad outcome, that people are now going to say that Bali Mumin are allowed to be brought in the Mizbeach in any situation. The public will not necessarily pick up on this distinction about who sent the carbon. So at that point, the Chacham listened to Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulos, but says the Magen Avram, the way the Machzas HaShekel is explaining it, what you see from here, the last line he says, Mashma, Lule Hai Gezer, if not for this Gezer, that we are afraid that the Bali Mumin will be born on Gabi Mizbeach, say we're allowed to be transgressed, Eloisa say lahakriv balmum, to bring this balmum on the Mizbeach, Mishum Shloi Malchus. So because of Shloi Malchus, so this the Magen Avram is paskening that if a person, it's neged today as much as it was hundreds of years ago. There are sometimes we have to make certain inroads into the government to help out Jewish affairs worldwide or locally, whatever it is. How much wiggle room are we allowed when it comes to certain religious sensitivities? Are we allowed to look away in order to make sure we have Shalom Malchus? According to the Magen Avram, you see from the story of Kamtza Bar Kamtza, we're allowed to transgress a lav in order to make sure we're on proper terms with the government. That's the Magen Avraham Paskins. It's a mind-boggling halacha if you think about the ramifications for it, or what it might have. All we learned out from this story of Kamtza bar Kamtza. However, before we take it too far, the Mishnah Berurah does say in source number 13, he quotes the Magen Avraham, and he ends off the last couple words over there. He says, "V'achroidim efakfim al zeh." The achroidim, he's quoting here the Pri Megadim, is not very happy with this kula of the Magen Avraham. The hasa b'koach nefesh, maybe over there it was only allowed to be lenient because there was a chash of the chacham where we're going to be meko, because they were afraid if they wouldn't bring this carbon, there would be destruction, devastation, which ultimately, unfortunately, they were right? But you can't necessarily take it to every situation where we just have to get something from the government. It's now going to allow us to transgress a lav. Chas v'shalom, Mishnah Berurah is not happy with this kula of the Magen Avraham, but where the Magen Avraham is coming from, again, is from the sugya of Kamtza and bar Kamtza. So those are 4 halachas to answer the riddle of how many times we find that, at least I saw brought down, in Shulchan Aruch easily, that we see Kamtza bar Kamtza reference to in a non-Tisha B'Av setting. But now to get back to a question I asked before, which to me was just I know that many of us speak about this question, but when I saw the answer that I'm about to share with you, it was just to me it was a very mind-opening, overwhelming idea. Again, the Gemara started off saying that Kamtza, because of Kamtza and bar Kamtza, Yerushalayim was destroyed. Right? We know what bar Kamtza did. It's very clear he's the villain of the story. He went and ratted it to the Roman government, made up a story about us, and he defiled, he put an imperfection in the carbon, and he caused us tremendous devastation. That's bar Kamtza. But the Gemara equally blames Kamtza. Bar Kamtza was the enemy. Kamtza was the friend. The Gemara equally blames Kamtza. What on earth did Kamtza do wrong that for forever now in history he's now branded as an evil villain as well? So this question I saw brought up in the Sefer Cheshukei Chemed, which is from Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein Shlita. He asked it from a different twist. He asked Chida. He says, "I have a riddle." He says, "Ketzad yitachin adam toiv." How could sometimes you see that a person seemingly is good and ubekol zeh asur l'schaber love, and nonetheless you shouldn't be friends with him? Right? We all know we're not going to be friends with bad people, with Rishayim. We don't want to hang out with Rishayim. But sometimes a person who might not be exhibiting certain behavior of a Rasha to us, nonetheless we should not be friends with him. And he quotes a Maharal. He says a couple lines down, he asked the question of what did Kamtza do wrong. V'heishiv al kacha Maharal, a couple lines down over there, in the third line down in the Tshuva, he says, Maharal explains as follows. Derech hamokom she'es bei sinas chinam, the way of the world, that if there exists in the environment a feeling of sinas chinam, which existed, as Chazal tell us at the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, when this story of Kamtza bar Kamtza happened, we were all suffering from a national disease called sinas chinam. Shalakech ha'echad oyev, so in order for, we'll call a bully, in order to be a successful bully, bullying 101, you need a couple of things in order to be a successful bully. Well, you need to be a bully. You need to have someone to pick on. That's basic. But the bully, in order to make himself be successful, needs to have a chevra. Needs to have people around him cheering him on, or at least, being his friends, or they can feel good about himself. He doesn't want to feel like he's just doing bad things to other people. So he has to be associated with certain people that'll be nice and friendly to him, and maybe give him a pat on the back sometimes, in order to enable him to keep doing his ma'aser rishus. So says the Maharal, a bully, will call him, I don't, for lack of a better word this minute, will take a friend in order to give him the more strength to argue on those people who he despises, who he hates. Therefore, the Gemara tells us it's because of Kamtza and because of bar Kamtza the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The Hayrais to teach us says Kashrus Bal Hasuda, the connection or the friendship that this host had it says bar, it should be bar, in Kamtza, take out the word bar there. In Kamtza, the whole relationship that the host had with Kamtza was only kedei lekabel hechsher v'idud lechalik al bar Kamtza, in order to give him, so to speak, a stamp of approval, a stempel that you're a good guy, you have a lot of friends. Kamtza was a friend of this guy. So look, the host was saying, Ploni Almani was saying, I'm a friendly person. I'm not such a bad person. I have a lot of people that associate themselves with me. I'm a good guy. Really, this love is based, it's really based on machlokes and separation. Says Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, we see from here an amazing idea that we have to be careful who we associate ourselves with. I can get along with Yankel, and I can have a nice relationship with Yankel. He's very nice to me. I can be very nice to him. But if I know that Yankel is the type of person who's going around and pushing himself upon others, being a bully or other types of inappropriate behavior on others. So it could be that my relationship to him, maybe not even in an active way, maybe even a passive way, is enabling him now to go ahead and be aggressive to other people. And that's really what gave the host here the power just to put himself over Bar Kamtza and to be that type of person, is because he felt that he has such a good chevra of friends. Says Rabbi Yitzchak Zilbis, you see from this maral a very important insight that we have to be careful. We learn from this story who we're associating ourselves with. We think, okay, big deal, I could be friends with this guy. He's not doing anything wrong to me. I'm not doing anything wrong to him. I don't care what he does otherwise. I don't care the fact that he's a mob boss and otherwise he might, knock people out that he doesn't like. No. If we're involved with this person, that's giving him now the power, the oxygen to keep himself going. And we cannot provide oxygen to such a Rasha. He ends off by saying, he says, B'chai Gavna, a good person has to make sure he runs away from such people, and not to get associated with them. The word chaver in Hebrew, ches vez reish, heim gam barach. It's the same words of to know when to flee. The gam cherev, and also the words of a sword. The same word of a friend is the same word as barach, to know when a person is not a good friend, to flee from him, or sometimes it's a chaver acts in a way that's friendly to you, but he's using it as a cherev, as a sword, to stab other people with being associated with you. So I just wanted to add on to that a little bit. The same letters of chaver is also same words of rachav, of to be wide, because as Chazal tell us, Knei lecha chaver, we have to be active to make sure we get good friends. And the Mefarshim there explain that the epitome or the essence of a good friend is someone who could help expand your personality, to help you grow in Torah and Avodas Hashem. If our friends are not enabling us to widen our abilities to make ourselves become better peoples, and they're not a chaver, then maybe we should be barach from them. Like he's saying, be careful that we shouldn't become a cherev. Want to say something?
The sages also went to the party, so they should have gotten censored as well.
Good question. Who were those chacham? We don't know, but for some reason you're right, and that's the Gemara says the chacham were by the party and they were held accountable for it, but we don't know who they were. But Kamtza, for some, we don't now. Maral, at next page you'll see the Maral in source 15. The Maral, when he speaks at this point that Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein was quoting, the way I understand it, I'm not going to go into it right now so much. You can look at it more, and it's in Netzach Yisrael Parakeh. He seems to learn that Kamtza and Bar Kamtza are not the real names, but they represent their midos, and he explains what Kamtza means, what Bar Kamtza means. I'm not getting into that so much right now, but it could be the Chachamim put the Gemara at least taught us in this fashion to give us this lesson according to morale, but not tell us what their real names were, but just to teach us this important lesson. Want to say something?
What about the host?
How come we don't know his name? Someone asked me that question yesterday. I think it's
why wasn't he involved?
Why we should censure him as well, right? We should say Reuven is now.
He's the one behind it.
Right. I think you're 100% right. I don't have a good answer. The best I was able to think of over the past day when I was thinking about this question was that maybe since it was so pashut that he's such a Rasha, we don't have to even tell. Gemara doesn't have to teach us he did something wrong. That's clear from the story. It's a chiddush that Kamtza did something wrong, but I'm not sure. Could be we develop a better answer.
There's three other questions. Maybe it's not for right now, but if the Rush is having a party, how come the Chachamim were there?
Correct.
And then if the Chachamim were there and silent during the issue with Kamtza or Kamtza, how come the Korban is what's caused the delay of the base Mikdash rather than the Chachamim being silent?
Well, we say both. We start off with Kamtza, Bar Kamtza. We end off with Zechariah ben Akut. They both are at both ends of the story. They're being held responsible. But let me just try to finish off with one positive point over here. So we know Chazal tell us that kol dor shlo nivna beis hamikdash b'yom, any generation that the beis hamikdash is not zeicha to be built in, so it's kilu nechra b'yom. It's kilu was destroyed in this generation. So I wanted to share an idea I found this year in a medrash I saw quoted that I think was a chizik to me, and I think we can mechazik each other on this idea. And this medrash says as follows: it's a medrash in Shiur Shiurim. The medrash says in source 16, the pasuk in Shiur Shiurim tells us, "Zedoidi v'zerei b'nois Yerushalayim." Kadosh Baruch Hu, referring to Klal Yisrael, says, "They are my beloved, they are my friend, the daughters of Yerushalayim." Excuse me. The medrash expounds the pasuk and says as follows: "Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, kol misha mevatel tzrachav." Anybody who pushes away things that he needs to do. He has a list, a bucket list of what needs to be done around the house and his job, whatever it is. He has tzrachim that needs to be taken care of, and he pushes them off not because he's lazy, but the yashav v'oisik b'Torah. He says, "I'm now going to throw myself and get involved in some Torah aspect." Zez doidi v'zerei. He says, "HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He is my beloved, He is my friend." V'loi oy. Not only that, elokilu bona beis hamikdash. by stopping what needs to be done. We'll try to find that more in a minute. But in its face value, the Medrash is telling us someone who's mevatel from his trochiv and says, I'm now going to get involved in something of Torah, it's as if he built the Beis HaMikdash. He's building the Beis HaMikdash, Jichsiv, B'nois Yerushalayim, which means B'nois Yerushalayim. We are now actively involved in building the Beis HaMikdash. So just to expound on this a little bit, maybe what this Medrash means is that there's a mission of it. The mission of it says, "Al taimar likashefne eshne shemaloi tipana." Right? A person should never say that when I have time, I'm going to learn, because maybe you'll never have time. That's a simple reading of the Mishnah. But the Kotzker Rebbe learned the Mishnah a little differently. Al taimar likashefne eshne. Don't say when I have time I'll learn, because Shema loiti pane. Maybe the loiti pane time is the time you're supposed to be learning. Maybe the time when things are overwhelming. Maybe the time when things are seemingly I have no time for anything. I'm so busy. Whatever we're busy with, jobs, house, family, whatever it is. That dafka is a time where HaKadosh Baruch Hu says you got to stop, drop, and roll. You have to stop right now and do something that's going to show your connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Torah. Says the Kotzker, Al time of the Kashefne Eshne, Kashema loiti pane. Maybe Gufa at that time of loiti pane, that is your time you're supposed to steig. The Rashivas Atzar of Aaron and Mishras Rabbaran in source number 18, he quotes a Chazal. The Chazal says in Eruvin, darshaning a pasuk in Shir Hashirim of Shechayros Ka'orev, that Klal Yisrael is referred to their beauty like the black young bacher is like his hair is black like a raven. So the Gemara darshans b'mi ata moitza Torah. With who do you find Torah? B'mi shemeisim atzay achzari k'oyer. Someone who makes himself an achzari like an oyer. Someone makes himself an achzar. What's a good word? Stubborn or mean, not nice, right? Or cruel like a raven. Asked Rabbanan Zatzal and other Mefarshim, what's going on over here? Torah is tchilasa gemilas chasam, soifa gemilas chasam. Torah is full of chesed. Gemara is now darshing a pasuk tells us we should be cruel like a raven. So Rabbanan explains as follows. He says it's about halfway down where the photocopy got a little messed up. He says ach be'emes. He says he brings first another chazal. He says that we find that in order to be suited for the Sanhedrin, to be a spitz, a chacham, a dayan in the Sanhedrin Agadol, the Gemara says he has to be someone who's full of chesed. If he has to have children in order that he developed a certain level of rachamim that can only be possible if he involved himself with families. And he says Reb Aaron, ach be'emes, k'moisha yetzer roitze levatloi af midas hachesed. Just like the Yetzer Hara is smart in a way where he often tries to pull us away from Torah with ways of chesed. He says, listen, the Yetzer Hara tells us, you can't learn right now, there's this chesed to be done. And it could be true, there's a lot of chesed that's out there, a lot of opportunities for chesed. But sometimes we have to recognize that's the Yetzer Hara as well. The Yetzer Hara could come dressed up like a Chassidish Rebbe, so to speak. He could come dressed up in a way that looks very religious. But sometimes it's not appropriate if a person has to be involved in Torah at that point. Umishtamesh b'kol ha'emtzoyim. The Yetzer Hara can get dressed up in any which way. Muchrach ha'adam l'olat Torah. A person has to push himself into the yoke of Torah. Gam kein l'ishtamesh b'kol ha'ma'amatzim, to push himself with all efforts. Even in order to make him seemingly look mean. Says Reb Aaron though, be'emes ain't a kind of benafshay chas v'sham achzarius, but not chas v'sham. This means that a person will become an achzar, will become a mean, disgusting person. Achzarech lisnaig l'maisa gam lishloi b'machshavto l'asiach das mitzaram ki'ilu hayachzari. But he has to make it as if, listen, right now I have designated that I have to learn. I have an hour seder, whatever it is. There's a lot of pressing needs that need to be taken care of, but this is Yarg V'Yavar. This is my life. This is my oxygen. I need to do this now. There's other pressing needs that need to be going. I'm not talking about Pikuach Nefesh. Things that say anything short of Pikuach Nefesh. This is the way it needs to be done. A person has to make sure he's in control. He finishes off 2 lines from the bottom. I don't have time to read everything inside. It says, he says, Abaran, often we'll find that things which need to be taken care of, if a person dedicates himself to learning when he's supposed to be learning, things will fall into place. Don't be so worried. Don't try to micromanage every situation and worry what's going to happen if I don't take care of it. If I don't change light bulb, what's going to happen? Either you'll change it later, or you know what? Someone else might change it and you'll be able to learn. Don't worry. Now, of course, this has obviously to take it in a proper balance, but we have to have this focus, says Rabbanan. We have to recognize this is a nisayon like any other nisayon in life, that often our time to learn Torah is challenged. I brought down a story from Chatzkel Abramsky, the Yeshiva in Slobodka in Bnei Brak. He said he was once giving a shmooze in Yeshiva, and he said like this: in my siddur, every morning after Birchas HaTorah we say Elu Dvarim, he says. And in my siddur, the last part of Elu Dvarim is we say the Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. That's in my siddur. He says, looking around this room, he tells the Bachram in Yeshiva, I think some of you have a different nusach. Some of you have in your Siddur the nusach of Kulam Kineged Talmud Torah. Everything comes before Talmud Torah. And he went on to, explain that we sometimes, unfortunately, we say Talmud Torah Kineged Kulam, but we're not living it. In a similar vein, I saw in the Hakdamatar of Shach Sefer and Avi Ezri, to keep in mind that the first print of Avi Ezri was printed in 1948. Now, for those who are well familiar, 1948 in Israel was not a calm time. In the middle of the War of Independence, Rav Shach was in Yerushalayim with the Brisker Rav, running back and forth between the sirens to finish up his Sefer. And his Hakdama to his Sefer, which again was written during the War of Independence, maybe that was the schus for the founding of the state perhaps, he says, Aval Ikra Avodas Ha'adam, the main purpose of the work of a person, says Rav Shach, is to uplift himself from things which are seemingly bothering him and overwhelming him. You want to have calmness and peace of mind and tranquility, says Rav Shach, throw yourself into learning. The Gemara says learning needs a certain peace of mind. The person can't learn if he's overwhelmed. Says Rav Shach, that's only going to happen. Where's your peace of mind going to come from? Not by being involved in so many other activities or being worried about if the bombs are going to fall on my head or not. It's very challenging, of course, if you're living in a wartime. But Rav Shach is writing this during the war and writing the only way to come to a place of calmness and steiging in Torah is to throw yourself into Torah. So just to emphasize this idea, the Medrash is saying, if you want to be Zoich and Ar Dar Be'ez Hashem, to not just Ki'ilu Bana Beis HaMikdash, but Mamish be Bana Beis HaMikdash, take this message. We're all familiar with the station identifications. We're listening to something on the radio, they're up to a great part, and all of a sudden everything's got to stop for 15 seconds, station identification. So certain parts of our life we're involved in other tiers, we can all take a station identification sometimes, even if it's just for 15 seconds or for 5 minutes, and stop what we're involved in and be Isaac in a Mishnah a day, or there's all types of other programs we can get involved in, learning whatever we want to learn. But with that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should see our dedication to Torah and Avodah. We should be Zeicha to the Bnei Beis HaMikdash Hashlishim here. Amen.